Before we start leading this debate as to whether technology leads the way, I have to say that obviously the members of this panel are all members of a technology network. So they are not necessarily arguing what they believe in. So this could lead to quite an interesting circular debate. I hope not, but it's intended to be a bit of fun and intended to make you actually think about the role technology plays in our world. Maybe sometimes it changes, but actually I'm going to introduce the members now and then they can thrash it out amongst themselves. Supporting the motion, I'm going to have to read this from the page because otherwise I'll forget who's going in which order. So ask me, guys, if you get confused as well. Supporting the motion, first of all, Faye, it's you. Now, Faye works at DWP, and by its very nature, the user is the focal point of all Faye's work, you know, day in, day out. But without technology, would she be able to do a job in the way that she does? For this debate, she's going to look at that and talk about how the advancement of technology has actually led the work that she does on behalf of the government, but also on behalf of the people that they're there to serve. After Faye will come Julie. Julie Wilson is the co-founder of a company called Settled. Now, Settled focuses on removing the stress around transferring or freezing the accounts, all sorts of accounts of somebody who's died. They act for corporates and government bodies, but again, they act for the individual. And it's a very difficult time that people are dealing with, particularly for individuals. So she'd be putting the case that actually technology is simply that tool to make lives easier. Without humans to design and program and interact with technology, it's no different to any other tool. And then will come Paul. Paul Wealls is not only an IoT and AI wizard who runs one of the largest meetup groups, IoT North. And actually, if you haven't been to one of his breakfast sessions, then you need to, because you're actually missing out on something very entertaining. But Paul is going to take us through his thoughts about why technology has been a game changer for us all, not only in the past 18 months, but prior to that. But it's led us out of a very critical situation that doesn't need iterating any further. And finally, Pete Daykin. Pete is the founder and CEO of a disruptive technology company, Wordnerds. Wordnerds probably sits at the interface of human activity and technology because it examines language with all its contradictions and nuances, and then uses technology to help clients understand their customers a lot better. Now, Pete, I'm sure what we'll hear here is some of the insights that's actually taught you. But without further ado, I'm going to get each of you to make a 5-minute presentation on your case. During this, we will invite questions. There'll be a little break between two of the motions for some quick questions, but if there are more, we're going to take them at the end. So here we go. You're allowed 5 minutes. If you exceed your 5 minutes, you'll hear this noise, which is me banging on an unfortunately empty wine glass. So here we go.
Can we have a 1 minute warning, Dawn? Can you put your finger up?
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So I'll do that after 4 minutes then. Good call, Faye. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dawn. So I believe that technology absolutely leads the way. So number one reason for this is that user-centered design doesn't lead the way, it only guides the way. So Henry Ford said, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And technology pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible. So yes, we need user research, but user research helps us understand user behavior, interactions, and it helps us to understand what people do, not what they say. So let's be completely real about what's really driving change. So technology has actually enabled greater social inclusion than anything else in our modern society. So successful technology meets a human need or solves a problem, but disruptive technology is way more powerful and it's really transformative. It actually changes behaviors. And I'm really passionate about digital inclusion, but just think about the change the internet made. That was driven from the military to have secure communications, but think about how we use it now to connect people. And I always loved the Barclays Digital Eagles advert where grandparents were like Skyping their children for the first time. So it was about bringing people together. And for me, the new era of voice activated technology is really powerful. It wasn't driven from a user need, but think about toddlers now, before they can pick up a pen and write, they can talk to an Alexa and ask it to tell them a joke or play their favorite song. It doesn't need any skills at all. So for me, technology leads the way because its potential is completely uncapped. In DWP, we say it's digital, but it's digital with purpose. It's all about what are the tools, like having the tools there to really drive service improvement and change. So we've used technology to enable straight through processing. So for example, in our bereavement service, somebody who's lost somebody close to themselves, they don't want to talk to us, they don't want to pick up the phone. So without having any human intervention, they can tell us all of their information, we can process that, and we can give them a bereavement support payment, and that's exactly what they want and their needs are met. So we are really pushing to provide safe spaces within DWP for real experimentation. So doing test and learns, we've stood up an innovation lab who are all just about the technology, because it's the technology and the tools which we'll then use to redesign services. So we're breaking down our silos. We've got a component architecture, and they are literally, like, I think about as Lego bricks. So our engineers are building the art of the possible in terms of things like payment engines, identity and trust, and we use those as configurable tools to then build services. So our big thing is that we're experimenting with AI. We're all about learning about our customers, segmenting them, personalizing their service, but radically, it's about prevention of harm. We want to start to spot people, spot trends where they're at risk so that we can intervene and prevent any serious harm. We also want to learn about, why do people not save for their pension when they're younger? What are the risk factors and how can we intervene earlier in life so that they don't rely upon our benefits? So for me, technology leads the way because it's the tools that we need to drive real social change, and it already has completely changed the way that we work, rest, and therein I rest my case, Dawn.
You need to bang the wine glass. Thanks, Faye. There's some really interesting points in there that actually, when you think, yeah, that is interesting to look at it like that. But we're going to hear what Julie thinks. Julie, opposing the motion. You do not believe that technology leads the way. The floor is yours now. I'll mute my microphone. Take it away.
Thank you, Dawn and Faye. I think that's a really interesting point. And actually, I think you're partly making our point for us because you're using tech to create nudge points to solve pension saving problems. So actually, I would argue that you are using tech as a tool. Before I start, I want to make 3 key assumptions so that we're clear about what we're discussing. And those 3 are that, firstly, by tech, what we're referring to is AI. We're talking about IoT, digitization, big data. We're not talking about tractors and calculators. And in terms of the challenging world, what we're talking about is global challenges like climate change, COVID, overpopulation, hunger, access to clean water, and so on. And what I really want to clear up is when we say that, or when the House says tech leads the way, we would contest that there is no single way. Life is complex, it's problematic, there are multiple solutions. This is not a puzzle with a single ideal outcome. Tech offers us an array of directions that we could travel in. And so for us, for Pete and I, the question really is, which way should tech be pointed? And to answer that question, we have 2 points to make. The first is, tech's a tool. It's a hammer. You can build or you can destroy with any tool. The point is what you decide to do with it. And therefore, we think that tech should be directed to offer humanity what it needs and to solve world problems rather than providing toys, which are very interesting, but leave the needs of humanity largely unaddressed. And from that, our second point is that tech really isn't being used appropriately. We're using it for some fun and exciting things. We've got driverless cars. We can navigate a helicopter across the surface of Mars. We've got Project Foghorn, getting seawater fuel. We can have Alexa play us a song. And we can even undermine the motor skills development of toddlers by teaching them to use a mouse instead of a pencil. But the basic needs of the human race are not being solved. And they could be if the political and social will demanded that we use tech to resolve them. No one needs to be hungry or thirsty. We could distribute shelter and resources fairly, and we could use tech to resolve all of those major global issues if we decided to direct those resources in that direction. And there are some really solid examples of how that could happen. So if we think about the fact that currently 24% of the world's energy needs are met through renewable energy, but by 2035, 100% of our needs could be met that way if the political will existed to make that happen. UNICEF told us in 2019 that 1 in 3 people globally do not have access to safe drinking water, whilst at the same time, we know that the richest 1%, those with more than $1 million in the bank, own 43% of the world's wealth. In which case, why hasn't Paul designed us an edge computing application that will wrestle some of those global elites' billions to spend on what should be a more radical set of transformative technologies to solve those problems, put in global pipes, sanitation, filtration, and give people clean water to drink? So what we're saying is that technology's obsession for quicker builder and quicker, faster, more powerful resources is great. We both work in tech. Settled is there to make people's lives easier at a time when they're incredibly vulnerable, and we rely on tech in order to do that thing. Is that my 1 minute?
You've got a minute.
Okay. But that vulnerability isn't generally being met by tech. And we argue that change the question. This is not about tech leads the way. That's kind of not the point. The point is, which direction do you want to send tech so that we can use it sensibly to humanity's better ends? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. And in my confusion of trying to get in at the beginning, I forgot to tell people there's actually a poll. I wanted to benchmark people's view at the beginning and then end.
That's a user
there is
problem.
a poll. If people want to have a look at it halfway through, we could see where we are halfway through. There's some interesting comments coming up in the chat, actually, about it's too much about making money instead of problem solving. And they cite the instance of rising cybercrime. But actually, since there aren't any kind of direct questions coming up, I think we can probably go on to you, Paul, and take your view on this, that actually it's the second argument in support of Faye's proposal that actually technology does lead the way. So please share that with us.
I certainly will. And Julie, thank you for very clearly articulating your case. Disagree with it, but well done. So first of all, resolving the global issues are not being solved by humans and greed. The resources is not the technology fault. It's the human side of things, and we're the ones that are at fault here. The billions are being challenged by the people with money today with things like cryptocurrency. So there is hope in the future that the greed will be taken from that top percentage that you mentioned. But I want to share with you the history of technology today, and where we can be with technology tomorrow. The history, I believe I can end this debate with one statement: the definition of technology. Technology, which comes from the Greek translated word techne, meaning science of craft, and logia, which is the art, skill, and cunning of hand, which is the sum of techniques, skills, methods, and processes used in the production of goods or services or in the accomplishment of objectives, such as, but not limited to, scientific investigation. Technology can be the knowledge of techniques, processes, and the like, or it can be embedded in machines to allow for operation without detailed knowledge of their workings. Systems, applying technology by taking an input, changing it according to the system's use, and then producing an outcome, and referred to as technology systems or technological systems in the modern form. The simplest form of technology is developed in the use of basic tools. So in prehistoric, invention of shaped stone tools, followed by the discovery of how to control fire. This is all technology, which increased sources for food with the control of fire. The invention of the wheel helped humans to travel further and quicker and be able to control their environment as well. And therefore, tech does indeed lead the way. It also has, from using stones as tools and the discovery of fire, to the world that we have today with the likes of artificial intelligence, which Julie kindly mentioned. The foundation of Mr. Daykin's business, I believe, or the web-fronted, valuable and empathic service that Dr. Julie Wilson has with Settled as well. How would that business work without technology? And that's the building and processes that you use to get there with the web front. The world has changed. We've seen a leap in the adoption and evolution of technology. Can you imagine the experience we've just gone through and still experience with the pandemic? If it had been in the 90s, or even in the early 2000s, how different that experience would have been with the technology that we had at hand. Would we have literally stopped completely? We weren't far away because the technology was still not quite as advanced as it is. We may have wiped out our old and vulnerable, and if we'd not had access to the tech that empowered the world that we are in the position we are in today. Look at businesses that have excelled, like Amazon is a clear example, but most importantly for me, the NHS and the phenomenal job they have done to organize and deliver vaccines in vast numbers like never before. Let's look at the medical and pharmaceuticals, the good for humans. They are now enabled to globally collaborating and sharing data across the world that has accelerated the creation of vaccines and treating the devastating effects of COVID sufferers. It's come at a time when scientists are collaborating and communicating in ever more innovative ways, driven to do so by a pandemic that could kill millions. Look at the data that the governments and the data that they have had at their fingertips to make decisions or not make the decisions because of the human element and decision-making process that they've made from their gut, as Mr. Boris Johnson has done many times. Rather than using our instinct and experience, we can use the technology. But I challenge that in regards to the current COVID situation, that we would not have got into the place that we are without the scale of technology that we have at hand. But they did not. Oh, shit, really? Okay, so let me give you some examples. Sorry, shouldn't have swore. Granger Market, great example. A traditional business that had to stop like most retail services, but being very innovative and leveraging technology, within weeks we're able to set a web front and do delivery services, enabling those businesses to continue. Companies like Tharsis in Northumberland, creating Bump, helping us work safely and abiding to social distancing. So my friends on the other side of the house have taken the point of view that technology isn't for good and it isn't leading the way. I disagree with that, and I should never say that in a debate, but I wholeheartedly do. We have a future ahead of us because of technology, but we have done for tens and hundreds of years. So I stand that technology is leading the way.
Oh, thank you very much, Paul. Technology sounded very much like a dark art there, actually. It was, yeah. I think maybe if you'd been on the other side, you could have equally used that argument. But yeah, we're just getting a little bit pushed for time. So we will give Pete his 5 minutes to make the case that actually technology doesn't lead the way.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks, guys. So firstly, I can completely understand why technology leads the way. Faye is, after all, a Wordnerds customer. She's used Wordnerds. She clearly understands the opportunities that that technology provides us. So we will forgive her being misguided and on the wrong side of this debate. For Paul, though, described as an IoT wizard by Dawn in the intros, it's interesting to hear that he thinks that fire is a cutting-edge example of technology. That's wonderful. But no.
Of words, Mr.
Excuse me, you've had your 5 minutes, Mr. Wealls. Yes, so we'll ignore tech extremists like Paul for the time being. So my job as the second speaker for the opposition is to look at Faye and Paul's arguments. And I think Faye makes some great arguments about the utilization of tech, the Ford's faster horses thing, you know, that whole piece about all the stuff that the DWP are doing. It's amazing what they're doing to help humans using tech. However, for every argument, there's a counter argument. Peter Thiel maintains that we wanted flying cars, we got 140 characters. He actually says that the rate of technological advancement is slowing down. It's slowing down as a result of governments and the regulation that they put in place. And it's slowing down because the inventive minds are spending too long worrying about petty things on the internet and less time worrying about big problems. And as Jules completely stated at the start of this debate, the challenges that we need tech to answer aren't the problems with Twitter. They are the challenges of globalization. They are the challenges of the environment. They are the challenges of population reaching huge numbers and the effect that that's having on our food supply chain and all of these things. It's not fair. Social inclusion. Yes, the internet has done wonderful things to link people up, particularly during COVID. But for every argument for social inclusion, I can cite an argument where Russian hackers have intervened using the internet in the US and UK elections. We can talk about the deleterious effect that technology is having on democracy. There's an amazing article in the New York Times about that a couple of months ago. I urge you to read it. You only have to look at the way that all of a sudden extreme politicians like Donald Trump and that fophead idiot Boris Johnson use fake news to get elected on a mandate of populism, and that is only been allowed in this post-truth political world because of the effects of social media and the internet. The internet can be used brilliantly for social inclusion. Unfortunately, humans being humans, we're using it to erode society. There's talk in the chat about tech being used to create wealth and not to challenge the problems. And I thought that was a wonderful argument. From March 2018 to the end of 2020, the global billionaire wealth of the world has increased by 3.9 trillion. By contrast, global workers, their wages have decreased by 3.7 trillion. Wealth aggregates because of tech. Tech is a scalable business. It's why investors want to invest in it. It's a hugely important part of its business model. But what it means is increasingly the world is becoming polarized. More and more people, more and more often, the wealth of the world is being concentrated in the hands of the few. And an acceleration of wealth and of tech and looking for tech to solve these problems will only exacerbate that. Paul says greed is a human problem. It is a human problem, but it's enabled by tech. Paul says that we are hypocrites because we own tech businesses and we run tech businesses, and we should there be arguing for the motion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the debate here, the title of this motion is not "This House believes that Pete and Jules are hypocrites." If it were, we would urge you very strongly to vote for the proposition. It is not. It's about tech, and we urge you to vote against it. One more point before I sum up. Paul mentioned vaccines. It's a wonderful, wonderful example of how tech is being misappropriated. The vaccine rollout in the UK did a great job of sticking plaster over the hideous way the government dealt with COVID before that moment. However, despite making up only 16% of the global population, people in high-income nations have received 47% of all vaccine doses, as compared to lower-income nations who have got just 0.2%. If there is one issue that we could use to show why tech is so dangerous, we could not have asked for a better one than that. So thank you, Paul, so much for us. It's really, really kind of you. So to sum up very quickly, and I know that Dawn's going to give me the eyes in a second. At Wordnerds, we often get accused that we are trying to.
We'll never find out what word nerds are accused of. I hope it wasn't anything that lands you in a court of law, Pete. We haven't got any direct questions coming up here, so I've got actually a few of my own that I want to check in. The first one.
Should we not look at the poll and see where it's that? That's,
but I did look a moment ago, and I hadn't.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Well, I can see that actually yes is 62.5% and no is 36.4%.
Can you see that, Paul? I wanted to see if Pete has any views on if the human beings have a plan when tech goes bad.
So this is precisely the problem for us. If you think that tech is going to solve all of the problems that we have in this world, then you're lying to yourself when you say that technology leads the way in getting us out of these challenges. Effectively, more so now than in any other time in the world's history, our generation have a series of compromises that they have to face, and our kids' generation have a series of compromises that they have to face. And if they don't make the right decisions, it's going to end up potentially in the cessation of society as we know it. Technology absolutely has a role to play in that, but we've already shown that because of technology, we've ended up in a situation where we're on the brink of global warming, potential ice ages when the deep ocean conveyor stops. That's the thing that's triggered each of the last 3 ice ages, and it's happened when temperatures have hit a certain point, all because of carbon emissions. We're at a point where society's never been so unequal, all because tech's been allowed to aggregate wealth in the hands of the few. And we can't carry on just using tech in any direction that it's going. Humans cannot be trusted to put the reins on tech and point tech in the right direction. And we need to fundamentally rethink the whole way that that tech works in this society and our relationship with tech. And that's why Jules and I urge you to vote against this motion.
We've got a question in the Q&A actually here, and this is an interesting one, and I would quite like Faye to answer this one if we can. Can we and should we look to program computers as technology with a moral compass? And I'm actually thinking of that around the work that you do, Faye.
Yeah, and I think, you know, so in DWP, what we say is that technology will never fully replace people. And I think that's a really important point. So technology leads the way for, let's say, the 90% of people who have quite simple inquiries or simple things that they want help with from us. So we know that in the majority of cases, more, 90% plus, people can self-serve, have straight through processing. We can calculate decisions safely. We can build up, the more we use data, the more we can build up a picture of that individual. And then we can make risk-based decisions about, how much evidence they provide us, how much money they should have, any risk factors around safeguarding. So in the majority of the case, tech can solve that problem, but there will always be a place. So we sort of account for about 10%. There will always be people who need to speak to people because of the complexity of the help that they need or the service that they need. So I think, tech leads the way for the majority in our case, but there will always be a place for people as well.
And actually, I'm just going to ask a question around that as well, around the work that Julie does. When people are dealing with bereavement or any other emotional states, Julie, we all know that we think differently. The chimp paradox talks about how it cuts off that frontal cortex, emotions get in the way. Is there an argument to say actually and I'm asking you to argue almost against your case here, that using technology, you are removing that variable that comes into play with human beings? And this is just leading on from that thing about should we actually program computers to make moral judgments? Is sometimes that distance beneficial?
So what we've done at Settled is to carefully craft our processes and all of our front-end UX around understanding the vulnerabilities and the needs of people who are going to come to us often in a really distressed state. So we've done a lot of research. We've worked with bereavement charities, and we've crafted, as I say, all of those experiences, not so that we take humans out of the process, but that we make tech adapt to those processes. And I thought it was really interesting with the comments that Paul was making. So he's talking about, going back to fire and stone and flint and stuff. Actually, he kind of made our point for us, which is exactly the same. Tech is a tool. You can't ever have the tool lead the way, because actually the tool will only get used if people know what to do with it. So people have always got to come first, because a man has got to decide to pick up 2 pieces of stick and rub them together and get something hot, or a man has got to decide to pick up a stone and bash a beast over the head with it. And in a far gentler sense, Settled has decided to use tech and to adapt it and to work with UX specialists so that we can provide the cleanest, easiest, simplest way through, so that when somebody is trying to close down the accounts, having been bereaved, then that process through is really gentle and as soft as it can be. So in terms of that moral compass, Pete and I spent some time debating this and talking this through. We're making a normative argument. What we're saying is that tech isn't being managed, and the tech process and its development isn't being managed. It's going off in all sorts of fancy directions, but it isn't being managed. But at the end of the day, it is only a tool, because men have got to use it. Men, as in both genders, human beings have got to use it. And that's the approach that we've taken at Settled, is it's people first, it's people centered. We've done a lot of research to understand what it is that people need, and then we adapt our tech to support those people in that particular set of circumstances.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you've got a hammer, does everything look like a nail? There's a question for Pete coming in here. Sorry, for Paul. It came from Andrew. It's gone further up now. Where is it? Andrew Gill says, Paul, what happens when Amazon sold all things to all people? everybody is a fulfillment center trading commodities? How do you respond to that? It's going to have to be quite quick, because at the end of this,
sure. So I don't really understand the question, to be quite honest, because I mean, you know, people always like to have choice and preferences to the services. The example of Amazon was about how they've adopted technology, and they don't see themselves as a fulfillment business. They see themselves as a technology business, as does BT and so many other businesses. Going on to some of the points that have been raised by my my friends here, it goes down the definition and the ambiguity of technology leads the way. We aren't being directed to talk about artificial intelligence and such like. Otherwise, there could be a very interesting case to put on that for sure, and about the moral compass especially as well. There are demonstrations that machines can go in the wrong direction with that if we understand them, like the problem with Facebook. However, in regards to the debate today and the sort of understanding of how we've evolved and being able to have some success, especially Pete's business and such like, over this current period of the pandemic, that, you know, technology is a tool. There is no doubt. It always has been a tool, but it has led the way with that tool to create evolution. So I stand by my stance that technology does lead the way. It enables us with evolution.
Now, I have just had a warning here that we've got 5 minutes left at the end of the screen. Charlie McDowell here said at the bottom of every problem is a human. I actually read that is that every human's problem is their bottom, but that's obviously, that's human error. The poll is there. I would be really interested if people in the audience that have listened to this can vote and see if they believe that technology does lead the way, or that ultimately it still remains a world built by and for humans, and actually technology will all be at our behest. I'll have a little look now. If you click on polls, you can actually, nobody's voted. Nobody's voted yet. I would say press your button now if you can, unless it's unless the tech is actually not showing us what's happening.
I can see a vote.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's 9 to no and 7 to yes.
It switched. Paul, you're on mute. It switched. It was the other way.
It was.
So come on, people.
Clearly.
We need some more yeses.
No. Clearly, people have had a chance to think.
So.
And it's tragic that actually I can't see it. So actually, we're saying that humans will still lead the way. When you think,
Dawn, you need to vote. You need to vote.
Oh,
you'll be able to see. You need to vote, and you'll be able to see. So click yes or no.
Will probably...
No, yeah, we'll not hold it against Dawn, whichever way you go.
I've voted. Yeah, I would use the example of actually where technology got a little bit ahead of itself. Two computers that had invented their own language, and ultimately it was the humans that shut them down. Isn't it? You know, it's kind of, would we like watching Star Wars if it was only robots fighting each other and no humans? Well, probably not. Thank you very much. All of you, you're all in tech businesses. I know that you all really believe that it's there to serve humans. The customer comes first. You're all doing an amazing job, and thanks very much for taking part in this.
Julie, Pete, thanks very much. Great.
Thanks, guys. Great debate. Well done. Great.
Good fun.